So this morning we're having a catch-up about the design and production and staging elements for Pandora's Locker, and thinking about the production that we've created and also the show as Dean originally wrote it and produced it. So I wonder, actually, we start with that a little bit. Maybe just give us what were you imagining when you wrote it, and how was it when it first got staged?
I think in originally writing the piece, I conceived it as a as a proscenium, or like a staged piece with an audience and the performers obviously on stage. But I've been in a lot of productions that have been kind of more immersive and staged in non-traditional venues and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And B, this piece is very much about breaking down barriers as to what opera is for young people as well. So I think a great piece of theater, or a successful piece of theater, should be able to be interpreted in many, many different ways. So it was interesting when we did it at the Glenn Gould School originally, which was a wonderful production. It was staged more traditionally, and then in contrast to the production that we just did here in Cardiff, it added a whole different layer of kind of immersiveness and engagement, I think, as well too. So both were different, both were equally successful, I thought, as well too.
It's interesting what you're saying about wanting to break down those barriers, because really for me that was why I made the choices that I made in terms of trying to put the audience right in the middle of the action. And certainly my experience of working with teenagers over the years in various different projects was that actually they're always blown away when they come up close, when they have up close contact with opera. And so it felt like this piece was as I started working with it more, there was so much in it where you could go, oh great, yeah, we'll just make them completely complicit in everything, so that they're the ones who are judging Pandora, they're the ones who are in the middle of her crazy visions, they're the ones who are watching her kind of fall apart and then put herself back together again. And they're the ones who understand it because they are the same age as her.
Exactly.
And so then actually they going on that journey with her, and having this incredible thing that is opera around them. So I mean, we all know that that when you have a really good operatic piece, the emotion kind of hits you right here. And if there's someone standing next to you singing, then wow, you're really right in the middle of it. So I really wanted to give them that experience, and it's not an easy thing with opera because as we know, the voice is very directional. There's lots of issues with balance when you have players off stage, or when you're trying to create a chorus, you're trying to get a sound that kind of melds, and so then if I split it, that's really tricky. So Dan had a really difficult job in trying to kind of reconstruct all of that, and I was really nervous about you coming and going, what have you done with my piece? But I knew that my reasons had really good reasons behind why I was trying to do
if it's justified, absolutely. If there's a reason behind it, it makes sense. And I think one of the most fun things from yesterday, the feedback from the young people, was them saying, "Oh no, that wasn't really an opera at all. I liked it, and the music was good, and the story, the music told the story." And I'm like, well, that is opera.
Yeah, exactly. It's what we understand.
Just maybe
opera.
Not what you've seen before.
Yeah. And that's where I think we started this idea of how we immerse ourselves in Pandora's world was where we started.
Yeah, exactly. How did we kind of get in and see things from her point of view, and I think also how do we use visuals which are really engaging to a young audience. So we've been really talking about how young people have so many images all at once, and about kind of technology and how that plays in, and how they store information and how they look at the world through Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, and how all of those things then play into a world which would ultimately be the visuals of the show, which I think is a really exciting thing to be looking at a show which at this piece particularly, which is set in a high school, and we kind of left school, as it were. And I think this idea of her really being a vision, and we're really playing with her world quite a bit, so it's not just a high school, it's like grown into something much more in her mind, which I think is really interesting as well as an approach.
We were also saying originally when you wrote this piece, the social media sort of tools and networks were really not as well formed.
Absolutely.
And so that wasn't something that was really available to you, whereas now the tech and digital and online end of that, both in the staging of the show and the engagement, the wraparound, the comms, every part of that with young people is going to be core if we can take it forward, because it's central to how they are and what they identify with and how they identify as groups and individuals. So.
We got in 2008. There was people didn't have smartphones, and now they're so incredibly ubiquitous. To have a high school opera without at least someone with a smartphone is just really disingenuous. It's not real.
And we were talking, earlier in the week about, how you could use that within the production, if when it went forward, and whether or not you could actually encourage people to be taking photos throughout it or tweeting throughout it and going, look, don't put your phones away, just put them on silent, but keep engaging all the way through, and whether we have a running feed up of stuff that's coming through that's kind of being mixed as the show goes on in some way. So there's lots of potential, I think.
And so many operas try to do that. They try to push the social media into the context of the opera, whereas in this case it's exactly what it's about. It's exactly part and parcel of the story.
The thing that is the biggest difference, I think, that we've talked around from when you made the piece to where we are now, is this idea that I wanted to explore within Pandora's sense of identity, her nature-nurture thing. Who is she? What makes her who she is? So the kind of sciencey, biomedical end of that, but the tech end of that too, because the teams now are very different, and we're in the UK and you were in Canada and so on. So just exploring the kind of the world, I suppose, that we've created around her, and maybe just thinking about some of the stuff you're saying about her being experimented on, or her being the experimenter, to find out more about herself.
I mean, that was our first starting point, really, was me thinking, because when we talked about the idea of it being a science piece, I was kind of thinking about, well, maybe all those visions that you've written are like a big experiment. Maybe she's being experimented on. Maybe somebody's kind of testing her to see what she's like. And then the more we started to talk about it, it became very obvious to me that Pandora was the scientist. Pandora was the investigator. She was the one that was searching and pushing for something. And that actually, that is, aren't we all doing that in a way, all the way through our life? And then that really informed what we started to look at then, design-wise.
Yeah, the design then really, I think, developed from there, because of course, initially when we were talking about her being an experiment, we were looking at kind of science labs and how do we bring this kind of more overt world of science in, I think, which so this more overt one, and then it kind of became more about her and what she was trying to do, and then we kind of found Pandora that way, didn't we? So it wasn't. So that's really how we discovered who we thought she was as a character, as this kind of nerdy but very kind of Hermione Granger-ish kind of character who's out looking for looking for herself and trying to find the answers, and really going to the books and going to these science lectures, and then the whole world kind of rippled from her. Then it made it quite. I think the rest of the world kind of fell into place once you kind of figured out. Once we discovered her.
Found her. And when I said to the young people afterwards, do you think that this story has a relationship to genetics? They all went, oh yeah. And you kind of go, oh right. Like, of course it does.
Yeah.
Oh, right, there we are, it does.
And I think I was really clear from the off when we were first talking about ideas for the show that I think we really need to resist the typical presentation of science and scientists within the show, because we know that puts lots of people off. It's an automatic barrier, much like many opera conventions would put lots of people off, and it becomes a barrier. So there's a pushing against it's not a piece of science made into theatre. It is a piece of theatre or a piece of opera, and how do we wrap around that the stuff which indicates in a useful way and pushes against the stereotypes of what some of those things might. So the worst case scenario I think we talked about would be if you made Pandora's dress in the France scene have either a genome on it or a kind of G's, T's, A's and C's on it or something, because it's such a literal, ridiculous representation of it's something to do with science kids, and it has to be smarter for them to buy it, and it has to be relevant, so they have to be able to accept that she operates in that world and it has something to do with that.
I mean, I think Nigel's theatre of debate method is fantastic. The audience already were like so in it.
Yeah, that's right. They were
so there. They would have gone with that for much longer at the time.
And the nice bit is you only wrote us a piece that's about 50-55 minutes, well us, but you wrote a piece that was 50-55. So I think we've got room to play with at the start and end of whatever we do show to explore that and to unpack it. So
yeah.